On the Florida coast, as Category 4 Hurricane Elena tore through the night, a struggling waitress counted her last $83 with only 5 days before eviction. When 20 leather-clad Hells Angels knocked on her cafe door, seeking refuge from the storm, she faced an impossible choice. Without hesitation, she opened the door and shared everything she had left. By dawn, the thunder of 200 motorcycle engines shook the ground outside her tiny cafe, and her life would never be the same. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Camila Hayes stood behind the counter of Sunrise Coast Café, her hands trembling as she counted the crumpled bills for the third time that evening. $83. That was all that remained between her and the eviction notice taped to her apartment door 3 blocks away. 5 days. The landlord had given her 5 days to come up with 2 months' rent, or she'd be out on the street. The wind outside had been building all day, growing from a whisper to a howl that now rattled the cafe's salt-stained windows. Hurricane Elena was bearing down on the Florida Panama coast with the fury of a Category 4 storm, and everyone with any sense had already evacuated inland. But Camila had nowhere to go, no family left to run to, no savings account to fall back on. Just this run-down cafe on Highway 98, the memories of her younger brother Lucas, and a stubborn refusal to abandon the last thing that connected her to him. At 28 years old, Camila looked older than her years. The past 3 years had carved lines around her eyes and added premature grey streaks to her dark hair. Working double shifts, sleeping 4 hours a night, surviving on coffee and whatever food was about to expire. It was an existence, not a life. But it was all she had. She moved through the empty cafe, her sneakers squeaking against the worn linoleum floor. The booths, patched with duct tape in places where the vinyl had split, sat empty. The ceiling fan wobbled overhead, its motor grinding in a way that suggested it wouldn't last much longer. Outside, palm trees bent nearly horizontal against the wind, and rain began to pelt the windows like bullets. Camila paused at the booth in the far corner, Lucas's favorite spot. He'd sit there for hours after school, doing homework while she worked her shift, his gap-toothed grin lighting up the room whenever she brought him free fries. That was before the accident, before the drunk driver ran the red light, before everything fell apart. She was 19 when it happened, barely old enough to understand the legal paperwork that made her Lucas's guardian after their mother died of an overdose. She'd dropped out of community college, taken this waitressing job, and poured everything into giving her 12-year-old brother a chance at a normal life. They had 6 good years together. 6 years of scraped knees and report cards, of teaching him to ride a bike and helping him through his first heartbreak. Then 3 years ago, she lost him. The insurance money from the accident had been enough to cover the funeral and a few months of grief. Then it was gone, and Camila was alone with debt she couldn't pay and memories that wouldn't fade. She'd kept working at the cafe because it was familiar, because the owner had been kind to her, and because every corner of this place held some ghost of Lucas. Then 6 months ago, old Mr. Patterson, who owned the cafe, had a stroke. His daughter lived in Seattle and wanted nothing to do with a failing roadside restaurant in Florida. She'd offered to sell it to Camila for almost nothing, practically giving it away just to avoid the hassle of closing it down properly. Camila had scraped together what little she had, taken out a small business loan she had no business taking, and bought the place. It was supposed to be a new beginning, Lucas's legacy, a way to honor his memory by keeping alive the place where they'd spent so much time together. Instead, it had become an anchor dragging her down. The equipment was ancient and constantly breaking. The location, once prime real estate on the coastal highway, had been bypassed by a new interstate. Customers were few and far between. The loan payments were crushing her. Now Hurricane Elena was coming, and Camila couldn't even afford to evacuate properly. She'd spent her last money on plywood for the windows and supplies to wait out the storm in the cafe's back room. Her apartment was a month-to-month rental she was about to lose anyway. At least here, surrounded by memories of Lucas, she could face whatever came next. The power flickered, and Camilla glanced at the ancient clock above the coffee station. 7:30 p.m. The storm was supposed to make landfall around midnight. She should close up, board the last window, and hunker down. There was no reason to keep the lights on. No one was crazy enough to be out on the roads now. She walked to the front door, ready to flip the sign to closed and lock up for what might be the last time. Through the rain-streaked glass, she could see the highway disappearing under sheets of water. The storm surge was coming in fast, and the low-lying areas would flood soon. She'd moved everything valuable to the highest shelves she could reach, but it probably wouldn't matter. If Elena was as bad as predicted, this cafe might not survive the night anyway. Camilla's hand was on the light switch when she heard it. At first, she thought it was thunder, but the sound was different, deeper, more rhythmic, like a mechanical heartbeat cutting through the storm's chaos. She pressed her face to the window, squinting through the rain. Nothing but darkness and wind and water. Then slowly lights began to emerge from the gloom. Not car headlights. These were different, lower to the ground, moving in formation despite the wind that threatened to push anything not anchored to the ground into the Gulf of Mexico. Motorcycles. Big ones. And there were a lot of them. Camilla's breath caught as the bikes pulled into the cafe's parking lot, their engines roaring defiance at the hurricane. She counted them as they arrived, her heart pounding harder with each one. 10, 15, 20 massive motorcycles. Their riders hunched against the wind, their leather jackets soaked through despite the storm gear they wore over them. As the bikes circled and parked in tight formation, Camilla saw the patches on their backs, illuminated briefly by lightning. The death's head, the winged skull, the words that made her blood run cold. Hell's Angels. 20. Hell's Angels had just pulled up to her failing cafe in the middle of a Category 4 hurricane. And from the way they were looking at her door, they weren't planning to leave anytime soon. The lead rider dismounted, his movements deliberate, despite the wind trying to knock him sideways. He was enormous, easily 6.5 feet tall, with shoulders that seemed to span the width of the doorway. Even through the rain and darkness, Camilla could see the authority in the way he moved, the way the others waited for his signal before dismounting their own bikes. He turned toward the cafe, and lightning flashed, illuminating his face for just a moment. Hard features, grey beard, eyes that had seen too much, a jagged scar running down his left cheek. This was a man who'd lived a life most people only saw in movies. He started walking toward the door, and Camilla took an involuntary step backward. Every instinct screamed at her to turn off the lights, lock the door, hide in the back until they left. These men looked dangerous. The kind of dangerous that made the evening news. The kind that left people hurt. But as the man reached the door, something made her pause. Maybe it was the way he waited, not trying to force his way in. Maybe it was the exhaustion she could see in his posture, the way even this giant of a man was struggling against the storm. Or maybe it was the memory of Lucas, who'd always believed people deserved a chance before judgment. The man knocked. 3 firm raps that somehow conveyed both respect and urgency. Camilla looked at the $83 on the counter. She looked at the eviction notice in her bag. She looked at Lucas's favorite booth. Then she looked at the 20 men standing in the parking lot, soaked to the bone, with a hurricane bearing down on all of them. She walked to the door and turned the lock. The moment Camilla opened the door, the hurricane's full fury burst into the cafe. Rain slashed sideways, drenching her in seconds. The wind nearly tore the door from her hands. The massive man in the doorway steadied it with one hand, his other gesturing for his companions to move quickly. Inside. Now! His voice cut through the storm like a blade, deep and commanding. The authority in it was unmistakable. This was a man accustomed to being obeyed. The Hell's Angels filed in rapidly, but with surprising order, each one nodding to Camilla as they passed. They were massive men, most of them, with the kind of presence that filled a room. Their leather jackets, despite the storm gear, bore the unmistakable patches. Chapter names, ranks, the death's head logo that marked them as members of America's most notorious motorcycle club. Camila stepped back, her heart hammering, as her small cafe filled with 20 leather-clad bikers. Water pooled on her floor. The temperature seemed to drop and rise simultaneously, the cold rain mixing with the body heat of 20 grown men crammed into a space meant for maybe 40 customers at capacity. The last biker in helped Camila force the door closed against the wind. The sudden silence, or rather the muffling of the storm, was almost shocking. Now she could hear the drip of water, the creak of leather, the heavy breathing of men who'd been fighting the elements for too long. "Ma'am," the leader removed his helmet, revealing short-cropped grey hair and those hard eyes she'd glimpsed through the window. Up close, he was even more intimidating. The scar on his face was deep, old, the kind that came from something serious. Tattoos covered his neck and disappeared under his collar. "Name's Steele. We've been riding since Jacksonville, trying to outrun this beast. Highway's flooded about 10 miles east. We're not making it any further tonight." His voice, despite its roughness, carried a note of respect. He wasn't demanding, he was asking. That surprised Camila more than anything. She found her voice, though it came out smaller than she intended. "How many of you?" 20. Steele gestured to the men behind him, who were peeling off their wet outer layers and trying to contain the water dripping from their gear. "I know this is an imposition, especially with the storm, but we need shelter, and we'll pay for whatever you can provide. Food, coffee, just a dry place to wait this out." Camila's eyes scanned the group. They ranged in age from maybe 30 to 60, all wearing the colors of different Hell's Angels chapters. She saw patches from Jacksonville, Tallahassee, Pensacola, even Mobile. These men had come from all over the Gulf Coast, and now they were stranded here at her dying cafe. In the middle of a hurricane, one of them, a biker with a thick red beard and arms covered in elaborate tattoos, caught her staring. He offered a small, almost apologetic smile. "We don't bite, miss. Just cold and wet and tired." "I'm Camila," she heard herself say. "Camila Hayes, this is my cafe." "Then we're grateful for your hospitality, Miss Hayes," Steele said. "We'll take whatever you've got." "We're not picky." Camila thought about the $83. She thought about her nearly empty pantry, the industrial refrigerator that held maybe enough food for one good dinner service. She thought about 20 hungry men and a hurricane that wasn't going to let them leave any time soon. "Find seats wherever you can," she said, moving behind the counter. "I'll see what I can put together." The Hells Angels settled into the cafe with a kind of organized efficiency that surprised Camila. Despite their intimidating appearance, the leather, the patches, the tattoos that covered nearly every visible inch of skin, they moved with respect for her space. The older ones took the booths near the windows, instinctively positioning themselves where they could watch the storm and the parking lot. The younger members deferred without being asked, taking the counter stools and the less comfortable seats. Camila stood frozen behind the counter, her mind racing through calculations that didn't add up. 20 men, maybe 3 eggs left, half a loaf of bread, some coffee, a few cans of soup in the back. "Not nearly enough, Miss Hayes?" Steele's voice pulled her from her panic. He'd taken a seat at the counter, close enough to speak without shouting over the storm, but far enough to not crowd her. "You okay?" "I'm fine," Camila lied, turning toward the ancient coffee maker. Her hands shook as she measured grounds. "Coffee's going to take a few minutes." "Take your time." Steele's eyes, she noticed, were scanning the cafe with the same assessing look she'd seen from social workers and bill collectors. He was reading the story written in cracked vinyl and flickering lights, and the general air of a business barely holding on. "How long have you owned this place?" 6 months. Camila couldn't keep the bitterness from her voice. "It's been a learning experience." A younger biker, maybe in his early 30s with a shaved head and a Tallahassee patch, laughed without malice. "That's one way to put it. Running a restaurant's no joke. My uncle tried it for 2 years before he threw in the towel." "Smart man," Camila muttered, then immediately regretted it. These men were her customers, possibly her last customers. She forced a smile. "Sorry, it's been a long day." "Long year, more like," said another biker, this one older with grey in his beard and kind eyes that crinkled at the corners. His patch read Pensacola, and beneath it Road Captain. "We've all had those." The coffee maker gurgled to life, filling the cafe with a smell that was at least familiar and comforting. Camila pulled out every clean mug she had, which was exactly 20, as if fate had planned this, and began pouring. The bikers accepted the coffee with genuine gratitude, their cold hands wrapping around the warm ceramic like it was precious. "Black's fine for me," Steele said when Camila offered cream and sugar. "Most of us are used to truck stop coffee." "This already tastes better." It didn't, Camila knew. Her coffee was weak and bitter, made from the cheapest grounds she could afford. But she appreciated the kindness in the lie. The wind outside intensified, shaking the building hard enough that everyone felt it. One of the younger bikers, Camila heard someone call him Flint, glanced nervously at the windows. "How bad's this supposed to get?" "Category 4, Camila said. "Could weaken before landfall, could get worse. Either way, we're in for a rough night. You staying here alone?" Steele's question was casual, but his eyes were sharp. Camila nodded. "Didn't have anywhere else to go." The bikers exchanged glances, and she caught something passing between them. Concern, maybe, or recognition. These were men who understood being stuck between bad options. "Well, you're not alone anymore," said the biker with the kind eyes. "I'm Brick, by the way." "That's Hammer over there, and Shadow's the ugly one in the corner." "I heard that," Shadow called out, but he was grinning. He was actually one of the less intimidating members, with laugh lines around his eyes and a Pensacola patch that matched Brick's. Despite her fear, despite the impossibility of her situation, Camila felt something unexpected, a small spark of warmth. These men, terrifying as they'd seemed through the window, were being almost gentle with her, respectful, human. "I need to check what food I have," she said, moving toward the kitchen. "It's not much, but whatever you've got, we're grateful," Steele interrupted. "We're not expecting a feast, just something warm if possible." In the kitchen, Camila took inventory with growing desperation. 3 eggs, half a loaf of bread starting to go stale, 2 cans of soup, a partial bag of rice, some wilted vegetables, half a package of bacon that was 1 day from expiring. She could make maybe enough food for 5 people if she stretched it. 20 men were sitting in her cafe. 20 men who'd been riding all day, who were cold and wet and hungry. 20 members of the Hells Angels, who she absolutely did not want to disappoint or anger. She heard footsteps behind her and spun around. Steele stood in the kitchen doorway, taking in the nearly bare shelves at a glance. "That's everything?" he asked quietly. Camila wanted to lie, but the evidence was right there. She nodded, fighting back tears of humiliation and fear. Steele's expression softened in a way that transformed his entire face. For a moment he didn't look like a Hell's Angel. He looked like someone's father, someone's grandfather, someone who understood what it meant to have nothing. "Listen to me," he said, his voice low enough that the others couldn't hear. "You opened that door for us. You gave us shelter when you didn't have to. That means something." He paused. "How much do you have? Money-wise?" "That's not—" Camila started. "How much?" $83, she whispered. "That's it." "That's everything." Steele was quiet for a long moment. Then he pulled out his wallet, thick with bills, and Camilla's pride flared up immediately. "No," she said firmly. "No charity. I'll figure something out." "It's not charity," Steele said. "It's payment for services rendered. We're customers, remember? We owe you for the coffee, for the shelter, for your hospitality." He laid $200 on the counter. "That's for tonight." No arguments. Before Camila could protest, he turned and walked back to the dining room. She stood there, staring at the money, her vision blurring with tears she refused to shed. Through the doorway she heard Brick's voice. "Steele's talking to the owner. Sounds like we might need to pool some resources, boys." "Already on it," Hammer replied. "We've got enough cash between us to make sure nobody goes hungry. Miss Hayes has been hospitable. We return the favor." Camila wiped her eyes and returned to the dining room with the money Steele had given her. "There's a convenience store 3 blocks down. If it's still open, I could— Nobody's going anywhere in this storm, Steele said firmly. We work with what we have. That's what we do. The other bikers nodded in agreement, and Camila realized these men were used to making do, used to survival, used to taking care of their own. And somehow in the last hour, she'd been adopted into that category. I can make eggs and bacon, she said. Some rice. It won't be much divided between 20 people, but then we share, Brick said simply. That's what family does. The word family hit Camila harder than she expected. She hadn't had a family since Lucas died, hadn't felt like she belonged anywhere. But here were 20 strangers, 20 Hell's Angels, treating her with more kindness than most people had shown her in years. Okay, she said, her voice steadier now. Give me 30 minutes. As she returned to the kitchen, she heard the bikers settling in, their voices mixing with the roar of the hurricane. And for the first time in a very long time, the cafe didn't feel empty. Camila worked in the kitchen with a kind of focused intensity she hadn't felt in months. She scrambled the 3 eggs with milk to stretch them further, fried the bacon until it was crispy enough to crumble into bits that could be distributed, and cooked the rice with the vegetables to make it more substantial. The 2 cans of soup went into a large pot with extra water to create more volume. It wasn't much, but she made it look like something. Through the kitchen window she could watch the bikers. They'd settled into an easy camaraderie, sharing stories in low voices, occasionally laughing despite the hurricane raging outside. She noticed how the older ones kept checking on the younger members, how they'd organized themselves into a natural hierarchy without any apparent discussion. There was respect there and loyalty, and something that looked a lot like brotherhood. The youngest one, Flint, sat near the window, still looking nervous every time the wind rattled the glass. An older biker with elaborate tattoos covering both arms, his patch read Ridge, Jacksonville, sat down next to him and spoke quietly. Camila couldn't hear the words, but she saw Flint's shoulders relax, saw him nod, and even smile a little. These weren't the monsters she'd expected. They were men, taking care of each other. Camila portioned out the food with mathematical precision, making sure each plate had exactly the same small amount. It was embarrassingly little. A spoonful of rice, a few pieces of bacon, a small serving of soup, a quarter of a piece of toast. She'd seen prison meals that were more generous, but when she brought out the first plates, the bikers' faces lit up like she'd served them a feast. This smells amazing, Hammer said, accepting his plate with both hands like it was precious. He was a massive man, easily 300 pounds of muscle, with a Tallahassee patch and forearms bigger than Camila's thighs. Thank you, Miss Hayes. It's not much, Camila said apologetically as she distributed more plates. I wish I had more to offer. You gave us what you had, Steele said from his spot at the counter. That's more than most people would do. That's everything. As the bikers ate, Camila noticed something remarkable. Despite being clearly hungry, these were big men who'd been riding all day. They ate slowly, savoring every bite. Nobody complained. Nobody asked for seconds, even though she could see they were still hungry. They treated her meager offering with the kind of respect usually reserved for fine dining. Brick caught her watching and smiled. My mama raised me right, he said. You don't disrespect someone's hospitality, especially when they're sharing what little they have. That's the rule. Where's your mama now? Camila asked, surprised at herself for making conversation. Georgia. She's 83 and still bosses me around every time I call. Brick's eyes crinkled with affection.
She'd like you.
She always appreciated people who helped others, even when they couldn't afford to. The storm intensified outside, and the lights flickered ominously. Camila held her breath, but they stayed on. Barely. How long have you been waitressing? Shadow asked. He'd finished his food and was nursing his coffee with the kind of patience that suggested he could make a single cup last hours. 10 years, Camila said. Since I was 18. I had to drop out of college when my younger brother needed someone to take care of him. That's rough, Shadow said. What happened to your parents? Camila hesitated. She didn't usually talk about this, but something about these men, their openness, their lack of judgment, made her want to share. Mom died of an overdose when I was 19. Dad was never in the picture. It was just me and Lucas. Lucas is your brother? Steele asked gently. Was. The word came out harder than Camila intended. He died 3 years ago. Drunk driver, the cafe went quiet except for the howling wind. The bikers exchanged glances that held recognition and pain. I'm sorry, Steele said, and his voice carried a weight that suggested he understood loss intimately. How old was he? 15. Camila felt tears threatening and pushed them back. He was a good kid, smart, funny. He wanted to be a teacher. She gestured around the cafe. This was his favorite place. I bought it to honor him, to keep his memory alive. Stupid, right? I can't even keep it running. Not stupid, Ridge said firmly. His voice was rough, like gravel, but there was gentleness in it. Honoring the people we lose, that's never stupid. That's love. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Hammer leaned forward. My kid brother died in Afghanistan. IED. He was 22. He paused, his jaw tight with old grief. I got a tattoo with his name. Wear it over my heart. Some people said I should move on, but I told them the same thing Ridge just said. It's love. You don't move on from love. One by one, the other bikers shared their own stories of loss. Brick had lost his daughter to cancer. Shadow's wife had died in a car accident. Flint's best friend had overdosed. These hardened men, these Hell's Angels with their fearsome reputation, all carried wounds that hadn't healed. We've all got ghosts, Steele said quietly. That's part of why we ride. Sometimes the only way to live with the past is to keep moving forward, together. Camila felt something shift in her chest. She'd been so alone for so long, carrying Lucas's memory like a burden only she could bear. But these men understood. They knew what it meant to lose someone and keep going anyway. This cafe, Steele said, looking around at the cracked vinyl and flickering lights. It's more than a business to you. It's a memorial. Yes, Camila whispered. Then we'll help you save it, Steele said simply, as if it were already decided. You can't, Camila protested. You don't understand. I owe money I'll never have. The eviction notice, the loan payments. It's too much. Steele's expression was unreadable. Let me ask you something. When we knocked on your door tonight, what did you see? Camila frowned. I saw 20 men who needed help. You didn't see Hell's Angels? You didn't see your worst nightmare? I saw that too, Camila admitted. But I also saw people who were cold and wet and desperate. I saw my brother, who always believed in giving people a chance. Steele nodded slowly. You saw us as human beings. You opened your door. You shared your last food. Do you know how rare that is? Anyone would have— No, Brick interrupted. They wouldn't. Most people see these patches and cross the street. Lock their doors. Call the cops. You let us in. You're starting to understand, Steele said, that tonight wasn't an accident. You're starting to understand that sometimes the universe sends you exactly who you need, exactly when you need them. Before Camila could respond, her cell phone rang. She pulled it from her pocket, frowning at the unknown number. Hello? Is this Camila Hayes? A woman's voice, professional and cold. Yes, this is she. This is Patricia Chen from Coastal Property Management. I'm calling about your apartment. Due to the hurricane warning, we've decided to accelerate the eviction process. You have until Friday to vacate the premises, or we'll have the sheriff remove your belongings. Camila felt the floor drop out from under her. But you said I had 5 days. That was before the hurricane. We can't risk property damage with a non-paying tenant. Friday, 9 a.m. The line went dead. Camila stood there, the phone still pressed to her ear, her vision blurring. Everything was falling apart at once. The cafe, her apartment, everything Lucas had wanted for her. What happened? Steele asked, his voice sharp with concern. They moved up my eviction, Camila said numbly. Friday morning. 3 days. The bikers erupted in angry mutters, but Steele raised his hand and they fell silent immediately. He stood up, pulling out his phone. Who are you calling? Camilla asked. Steele's smile was dangerous and protective at the same time. Family, he said simply. It's time to activate the network. Steele stepped outside into the hurricane, his phone pressed to his ear, his leather jacket whipping around him like a cape. Through the window, Camilla watched him pace back and forth in the covered area near the door, his gestures animated despite the wind trying to knock him over. He was on the phone for nearly 20 minutes, occasionally shouting to be heard over the storm. The other bikers had fallen into a tense silence, watching their president with expressions that suggested they knew something Camilla didn't. There was anticipation in the air, mixed with something that looked almost like excitement. What's he doing? Camilla finally asked Brick, who sat closest to her at the counter. Brick's smile was mysterious. Making things right. That's what Steele does. I don't understand. You will. Brick's eyes crinkled with warmth. Just trust the process, Miss Hayes. When Steele finally came back inside, his beard was white with rain, and his eyes were bright with purpose. He shook off the water and returned to his seat at the counter, accepting a fresh cup of coffee from Camilla with a nod of thanks. It's done, he announced to the room. Word's out. We should see movement by morning, if not sooner. What word? Camilla asked, frustration creeping into her voice. What's happening? Steele took a long drink of coffee, then set the mug down carefully. Before I answer that, I need to ask you something. Do you remember everyone you've helped over the years? Camilla blinked at the unexpected question. What do you mean? This cafe's been here a long time. You've been working here for 10 years. That's a lot of travelers, a lot of people passing through. Steele's gaze was intense. Do you remember them all? No, of course not. There've been thousands of people, but some stand out, Brick interrupted. Some you remember because they needed more than just food and coffee. Camilla thought about it. There had been so many faces over the years, but yes, some stayed with her. The trucker who'd had a heart attack in the parking lot. The teenage runaway she'd fed and given bus money to. The veteran with PTSD who'd broken down crying at the counter, and she'd sat with him for hours. I remember some, she admitted quietly. Ridge leaned forward, his tattooed arms resting on the table. About 7 years ago, there was a biker who came through here. Big guy, red beard, riding a beat-up Harley that was barely holding together. He'd been riding for 3 days straight, trying to get to his daughter's wedding in Miami. He was broke, exhausted, and his bike had just about given up. The memory hit Camilla like a wave. Owen, she said. Owen Fletcher. Ridge's eyebrows shot up. You remember him? Of course I remember him. He was devastated. He said it was his little girl's wedding and he was going to miss it because his bike died and he had no money for repairs. Camilla could still see Owen's face, the tears in his eyes, as he'd explained that his daughter hadn't spoken to him in years. And this wedding was his chance to make things right. My brother Lucas was here that day. He was 12. He heard Owen's story and she trailed off, remembering. Lucas had gone into the back and come out with the coffee can, where they kept spare change. He dumped it on the counter, maybe $30 in quarters and dimes, and pushed it toward Owen. For your daughter, Lucas had said with that gap-toothed smile. You gotta make it to her wedding. Camilla had added another 50 from her own tips, and Robert, the cafe's old owner, had called his mechanic buddy, who'd come out and fixed Owen's bike for the cost of parts only. They'd fed Owen, sent him on his way with a full tank and sandwiches for the road. I made it to the wedding, Ridge said quietly, because of you and your brother and the kindness of strangers who saw a broken man and decided to help. Camilla stared at him. You're Owen Fletcher? I go by Ridge now. Been part of the Jacksonville chapter for 5 years. He touched the elaborate tattoos on his arms. After the wedding, after I reconnected with my daughter, I realized I needed a new life. A brotherhood. The Hells Angels gave me that, he paused. But I never forgot the cafe on Highway 98, where a waitress and a kid with a coffee can full of change saved my relationship with my daughter. Camilla felt tears burning in her eyes. Lucas would be so happy to know that. There's more, Brick said. He stood up and walked over to the counter, his weathered face serious. 4 years ago, I came through here with my niece, Rita. She was 17, pregnant, running away from an abusive situation. We stopped for food, but Rita was having a panic attack in the bathroom. Another memory surfaced. Camila remembered the teenage girl crying in the bathroom, terrified and alone. The older man who'd been with her, desperate to help but not knowing how. You sat with her, Brick continued. For 2 hours, you sat in that bathroom and talked to her. You gave her the number for a women's shelter, helped her call them, even offered to drive her there yourself. You told her that being scared didn't make her weak and that asking for help was the bravest thing she could do. I remember, Camila whispered. Is she okay? Brick's face transformed with joy. She's a nurse now, married to a good man, has 2 kids. She turned her whole life around, and it started that day in your bathroom when you showed her that someone cared. Shadow spoke up next. 2 years ago. My son Derek, he stopped here after a fight with me. He was 19, angry, told me he never wanted to see me again. He sat in that booth over there. Shadow pointed to Lucas's favorite spot. And you brought him coffee and pie he didn't order. Camila remembered that one too. A young man with tears streaming down his face, clearly in pain. She'd sat down across from him and asked if he was okay. He'd told her everything, the fight with his father, how he felt like a disappointment, how he didn't know if he could fix things. I told him that fathers and sons fight because they care, Camila said. That the opposite of love isn't anger, it's indifference. And if he was this upset, it meant he still loved his dad. He called me the next day, Shadow said, his voice thick with emotion. We talked for 4 hours. Started rebuilding our relationship. We're solid now, and it's because you took the time to care about a stranger's kid. One by one, more stories emerged. Hammer's friend, who Camila had helped when his motorcycle broke down. Flint himself, who'd stopped here a year ago when he was suicidal. And Camila had noticed the scars on his wrists and gently given him a crisis hotline number written on a napkin. A teenager from another chapter whose runaway sister Camila had fed and called the police for, not to arrest her, but to get her connected with social services. You've been saving people for years, Steele said finally. Not just with food and shelter, but with kindness. With seeing people as human beings when they were at their lowest. Do you understand what that means to us? What that means to the Brotherhood? Camila shook her head, overwhelmed by the weight of these revelations. She'd just been doing what felt right, what Lucas would have wanted her to do. It means, Steele continued, that your family, whether you knew it or not, you've been protecting and helping Hell's Angels and their families for a decade. That makes you one of ours. And we protect our own. He pulled out his phone and showed her the screen. Text messages, dozens of them, all coming in rapid succession. Oakland chapter rolling. ETA 6 hours. Daytona sending 20 bikes. They'll ride through the storm. Atlanta chapter heard. On our way. Phoenix wants to know what you need. Camila stared at the messages, her mind struggling to process what she was seeing. I don't understand. Why are they coming? Steele's smile was fierce and protective. Because we take care of family. And you, Camila Hayes, just became the most protected person in Florida. The hurricane raged through the night, but inside the cafe, something miraculous was happening. As more text messages flooded Steele's phone, the stories kept coming. Each biker had a connection to Camila's kindness, some direct, others through family members or brothers in the club. The web of lives she'd touched without knowing it stretched far wider than she'd ever imagined. Flint, the youngest member who'd been so nervous earlier, finally spoke up. His voice was soft, almost fragile. Miss Hayes, you probably don't remember me. I came through here about 14 months ago. Camila studied his face, trying to place him. He would have been even younger then, maybe 23. Something about his eyes tugged at her memory. You were sitting right there. Flint pointed to a booth near the back. 3 in the morning. I'd been riding for days, running from everything. I had a plan to ride my bike off the pier at sunrise. End it all. The memory crashed over Camila with startling clarity. A skinny kid with hollow eyes, staring at nothing, his hands shaking as he held a cup of coffee he never drank. She'd noticed the scars on his wrists when he'd pushed up his sleeves, the fresh ones that were still healing. "I remember," Camila whispered. "You ordered coffee but never touched it. You sat down across from me," Flint continued, his voice cracking. "You didn't ask questions. You just said, 'Bad night?' And I said, 'Bad life.' And you know what you did?" Camila shook her head, though she was starting to remember. "You told me about your brother. About Lucas. How you'd lost him, and how some days the pain was so bad you didn't want to get out of bed. But you said that grief was proof of love, and that love never wasted, even when the person was gone." Flint wiped his eyes roughly. "Then you wrote a phone number on a napkin, a crisis hotline. You didn't make a big deal about it. You just slid it across the table and said, 'Just in case the night gets darker.' Did you call?" Camila asked, though she could see the answer in his face. "At sunrise. I was sitting on my bike at the pier, and I pulled out that napkin. I don't know why. I was going to throw it away, but I called instead." Flint's smile was watery but genuine. "They talked me down, connected me with a therapist. 3 months later, I met Ridge at a support group for veterans. He introduced me to the club, gave me a family when I thought I'd never have one again." Ridge reached over and squeezed Flint's shoulder. "Kid's been riding with us for a year now. Clean, sober, and one of the best mechanics in the chapter." Hammer cleared his throat, his massive frame somehow looking smaller as he prepared to speak. "My turn, I guess. 5 years ago, my marriage was falling apart. I was drinking heavy, angry all the time. Stopped here on my way to do something stupid. My wife had just left, taken the kids. I'd lost my job. Felt like I had nothing left." He looked at Camila with raw honesty. "You were closing up. It was late, maybe midnight. But you saw me sitting on my bike in the parking lot, and you came out. Asked if I needed anything. I said no, but you brought me coffee anyway. Sat on the curb next to me like we were old friends." Camila did remember that night. A huge man crying silently, his whole body shaking with suppressed sobs. She'd sat with him for an hour, mostly in silence, occasionally asking gentle questions. "You told me that rock bottom was a foundation to build on," Hammer said. "That the only way up from there was to start building, one brick at a time. You said your brother used to tell you that storms don't last forever, but the things we build do." He gestured around the cafe. "This place. You built this. And I went home and started rebuilding my life. Got sober. Got my family back. Been clean 5 years now." Shadow spoke next, his voice rough. "You helped my boy, Derek, but you also helped me. Same night, actually. I came looking for him after he stormed out. Found him here and you were talking to him. When I walked in, you could have told me to leave, let him have his space. Instead, you made us both sit down. You mediated. Helped us actually talk instead of shout." "I remember," Camila said. "You both needed to be heard. My son and I have dinner every Sunday now," Shadow said. "We talk, really talk. That started here, because you cared enough to get involved." The stories continued, each one a thread in a tapestry Camila hadn't known she was weaving. A biker's daughter she'd given money to for gas. A member's elderly mother she'd helped when her car broke down, calling a tow truck and waiting with her for 2 hours. A teenager connected to the club who'd been contemplating dropping out of school. And Camila had spent an evening talking to him about second chances and how Lucas had always valued education. Steele had been quiet through all of this, watching Camila's face as each revelation landed. Now he leaned forward, his scarred face serious. "Do you see it now?" he asked. "Do you understand what you've been doing all these years?" "I was just trying to be kind," Camila said, overwhelmed. "Like Lucas taught me. He always saw the best in people." "You've been a beacon," Steele said. "A light on a dark highway. For 10 years you've been saving lives, some dramatically, like Flint, others quietly, like helping families reconnect. But every single act of kindness rippled outward. You didn't just help individuals. You helped their families, their friends, their brothers in the club." Brick nodded. "My niece Rita? She's a nurse now. How many lives has she saved because you gave her the courage to change her life?" Ridge made it to his daughter's wedding. Now he's got 2 grandkids who have their grandfather in their lives. Hammer's kids have their father back, sober and present. "The mathematics of kindness," Ridge said softly, "is exponential. One good act creates 10 more. Those 10 create 100. You've been starting chain reactions for a decade, Camila. Outside, the hurricane howled, but inside the cafe, Camila felt something shift. She'd spent 3 years drowning in grief, believing that losing Lucas meant losing everything that mattered. The cafe had felt like a memorial to failure, a monument to dreams that died. But these men were showing her something different. Lucas's kindness hadn't died with him. It had lived on through her, spreading outward like ripples on water, touching lives she'd never know about, creating change she'd never witness. The calls I made tonight, Steele said, pulling out his phone again, went to every chapter in the southeast. I told them about Camila Hayes, the angel of Highway 98, the woman who's been protecting and helping Hell's Angels and their families for 10 years without asking for anything in return. I told them she was in trouble, that she needed us. He showed her his phone. The messages had multiplied. Dozens of chapters, hundreds of members, all responding. They're coming, Steele said simply. By morning, this parking lot is going to be filled with bikes. Hell's Angels from Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, South Carolina. They're riding through a hurricane to get here. Because that's what we do for family. Camila's hands were shaking. I can't accept charity. I can't. It's not charity, Hammer interrupted firmly. It's a debt repaid. You saved my marriage. You saved Flint's life. You gave Ridge his daughter back. You've given us more than we could ever repay, but we're going to try. Steele stood up, his presence commanding attention. Camila Hayes, on behalf of every Hell's Angel you've ever helped, every family member you've shown kindness to, every lost soul you've guided home, we're here to tell you that your cafe isn't closing. Your eviction isn't happening, and you're never going to be alone again. The bikers stood as one, a wall of leather and loyalty, and Camila finally let herself cry. Dawn broke over the Florida coast with an eerie calm. Hurricane Elena had passed through during the night, leaving behind a world transformed by wind and water. Debris littered the highway. Palm trees lay uprooted like fallen giants. Power lines dangled dangerously, but the cafe still stood, battered but unbroken, its windows intact and its foundations solid. Camila had dozed fitfully in one of the booths, wrapped in a borrowed leather jacket that smelled like motorcycle exhaust and something she could only describe as safety. When she woke, the first thing she heard was the rumble of engines. Not 20 engines, hundreds. She sat up, her body stiff from the uncomfortable sleeping position, and looked out the window. What she saw made her heart stop. The parking lot was completely filled with motorcycles. Chrome and steel gleamed in the morning sun, arranged in perfect military precision. But it wasn't just the parking lot. Bikes lined the entire highway in both directions as far as she could see. They filled the convenience store lot across the street. They occupied every available space for at least a quarter mile. 247, Steele said from behind her. She turned to find him holding 2 cups of coffee, looking surprisingly alert despite the sleepless night. That's the current count. More are still arriving. Camila took the coffee with shaking hands. 247 Hell's Angels, from 12 different chapters. Steele's smile was proud. Oakland sent their entire leadership. Daytona brought 50 bikes. Even got some brothers from Texas who rode through the storm. Word spread fast. Through the window, Camila watched as bikers dismounted, all wearing their colors, all moving with purpose. They weren't just standing around. Some were already clearing debris from the parking lot. Others were examining the cafe's exterior, checking for damage. A group was unloading supplies from trucks that had somehow made it through. The door opened, and a massive biker entered, even bigger than Hammer, with a silver beard down to his chest and Oakland patches on his jacket. His presence filled the entire cafe. "You must be Camila Hayes," he said, his voice like thunder. "I'm Reaper, president of the Oakland chapter. Steele tells me you're the angel who helped Big Mike 20 years back." Big Mike. Camila tried to place the name. Hypothermia case. You found him in your parking lot, probably saved his life. He's my VP now. Wanted to be here himself, but he's recovering from surgery. Sent me with his gratitude and this. Reaper handed her an envelope thick with cash. $3,500 from Oakland chapter. Consider it back payment for medical bills you probably helped with. Before Camila could protest, another biker entered, then another, then a whole stream of them, each representing different chapters, each carrying envelopes, each with a story of how Camila or the cafe had touched their lives, or the lives of someone they loved. The money piled up on the counter. $5,000 from Daytona, $3,000 from Jacksonville, $2,500 from Atlanta. Smaller amounts from individual members, hundreds and fifties and twenties, each given with genuine gratitude. "Stop," Camila finally said, her voice breaking. "Please stop. This is too much. I can't accept this." "You can and you will," said a woman's voice. Camila turned to see a female biker entering, her patch reading Phoenix and Vice President embroidered beneath. She was in her 40s, with sharp eyes and a presence that commanded respect. "I'm Viper. You helped my nephew 8 years ago. Kid was stranded here, broke and scared. You fed him, gave him gas money, didn't ask questions. He's a lawyer now, successful, happy, because one waitress showed him kindness when he had nothing." Viper placed an envelope on the counter. "This is from Phoenix chapter. $10,000, non-negotiable. You're one of ours now." Steele stepped forward, pulling out a folder. "We did some math last night. Called your bank. Called your landlord. Got the full picture of your situation." He opened the folder, showing Camila paperwork she recognized. Her loan documents. Her eviction notice. "You owe $12,000 on the cafe loan. $3,000 to your landlord for back rent. There are some repairs needed here. Probably another $5,000. Add in some buffer for operating costs, and we figured $30,000 would set you straight." He gestured to the cash on the counter. "We're at $42,000 right now. And more chapters are still arriving." Camila couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. The number was incomprehensible. Brick approached with a man in a suit who looked distinctly uncomfortable, surrounded by so many bikers. "This is James Chen. He's a lawyer. Hells Angels friendly. He's going to handle your landlord situation. Make sure that eviction notice disappears and you get a new lease with better terms." "Already filed the paperwork," James said, adjusting his glasses nervously. "Your landlord was violating several tenant protection laws by accelerating the eviction during a natural disaster. He's agreed to withdraw the notice and accept the back payment. You're safe." Another biker stepped forward, this one with Pensacola patches and treasurer beneath. "I'm handling your bank situation. The loan gets paid in full today. You'll own this cafe free and clear." Ridge approached with rolled-up papers. "These are architectural plans. We're expanding the cafe, adding a proper kitchen, fixing the electrical, upgrading everything. We've got contractors lined up, all friends of the club, all willing to work at cost. Figure 2 months of renovations, and this place will be beautiful." "There's more," Steele said. He pulled out another document, this one looking official. "We're establishing Sunrise Coast Café as an official Hells Angels rest stop. Protected territory. Means you'll have steady business from every chapter in the Southeast. We've got a network of tens of thousands of members who travel these highways. They'll all stop here, eat here. You'll never lack for customers again," Hammer grinned, "and nobody will ever mess with you. You're under Hells Angels protection now. That means something. Try to evict you again. Won't happen. Try to shut you down. Not a chance. You're family, and we protect family." Camila looked around at the sea of leather-clad bikers filling her cafe, spilling out into the parking lot, all here because of kindness she'd shown, without expecting anything in return. She thought about Lucas, about his gap-toothed smile, and his belief that people were fundamentally good if you gave them a chance. "Lucas would love this," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Your brother sounds like he was a wise kid," Steele said gently. "He taught you well, and now his legacy gets to continue. This cafe, this beacon he loved so much, it's going to shine brighter than ever." Viper pulled out a leather vest, smaller than the men's jackets, but clearly custom-made. On the back was embroidered, "Property of Hells Angels, Angel of Highway 98, protected. You don't have to wear it," Viper said. "But it's yours if you want it, a symbol that you're one of us." Camila took the vest with trembling hands, running her fingers over the careful stitching. Angel of Highway 98. Lucas used to call her that, joking that she was everyone's guardian angel. Now it was literal. I don't know what to say, Camila managed. Say you'll keep being who you are, Steele replied. Keep helping people. Keep being kind. Keep honoring your brother's memory. That's all we ask. Outside, the sound of more motorcycles arriving rumbled like thunder. The transformation had begun, and Camila Hayes' life would never be the same. 6 months later, Sunrise Coast Café looked like a completely different place. The renovation had transformed it from a struggling roadside diner into a thriving hub of activity. The new kitchen gleamed with stainless steel and modern equipment. The dining room had been expanded, with comfortable booths upholstered in durable leather and tables made from reclaimed wood. The old flickering lights had been replaced with warm Edison bulbs that gave the space an inviting glow. But the most dramatic change was outside. Where there had once been a simple parking lot, there now stood a proper motorcycle pavilion with covered parking for over 100 bikes, security cameras, and a maintenance area where riders could do basic repairs. A large sign hung above the entrance. Sunrise Coast Café, official Hells Angels rest stop. All riders welcome. Camila stood behind the counter, watching the lunch rush with a satisfaction she hadn't felt in years. The cafe was packed. Bikers occupied half the seats, their leather jackets hanging on hooks that had been installed specifically for that purpose. But there were also families, truckers, locals who'd heard about the transformation and came to see it for themselves. Her new staff, 3 waitresses and 2 cooks, all carefully vetted and trained, moved efficiently through the space. Camila had learned to delegate, though she still worked most shifts because she loved it. This was her place now, truly hers, and it was thriving. The bell above the door chimed, and Steele walked in with Brick and Ridge. They'd become regular visitors, stopping by at least once a week to check on things and enjoy what had become famous as the best coffee on Highway 98. Camila. Steele's face broke into a genuine smile. Place looks good. Busy today. Always busy now, Camila replied, pouring their usual coffee. Had to turn away a tour bus yesterday because we were at capacity. Never thought I'd have that problem, Brick laughed. That's what happens when word gets out. Best food, best service, and the safest stop on the Gulf Coast. You're a legend now. It was true. The cafe had become famous throughout the motorcycle community and beyond. Articles had been written about the waitress who'd sheltered Hell's Angels during a hurricane and been adopted into their family. Travel blogs featured Sunrise Coast Café as a must-visit destination. But more importantly, it had become exactly what Lucas had always dreamed it could be, a beacon for travelers, a place where anyone could find warmth, good food, and genuine kindness. Ridge pulled out his phone. Got something to show you. He scrolled through photos of a young woman in a nursing uniform, smiling proudly. Remember my niece Rita? The one Brick brought through here years ago? Well, of course, Camila said. She just got promoted to head nurse at her hospital. She wanted me to give you this. Ridge handed Camila a handwritten letter. It was from Rita, thanking her for the kindness shown years ago, explaining how that conversation in the bathroom had changed her life trajectory. At the bottom, she'd written, "You saw me when I was invisible. You gave me hope when I had none. I try to be that person for my patients now. Thank you for teaching me what real compassion looks like." Camila had to wipe her eyes. Letters like this arrived regularly now, from people she'd helped over the years, who'd tracked her down through the Hells Angels network. Each one was a reminder that Lucas's philosophy had been right. Kindness rippled outward in ways you couldn't predict or measure. The door chimed again, and Flint entered with a young woman. He looked completely different from the broken kid who'd sat in her booth contemplating suicide. He was healthy now, confident, with color in his cheeks and light in his eyes. "Miss Hayes, this is Angela," Flint said, his voice proud. "My girlfriend. We're getting married next month, and we wanted to invite you personally." Angela shook Camilla's hand warmly. "Flint told me what you did for him, how you saved his life. I wouldn't have met him if not for you, so thank you seems inadequate, but thank you. I'd be honored to come, Camila said, hugging them both. After they left, Steele leaned against the counter. You see what you built here? It's not just a cafe. It's a legacy. Lucas would be proud. Camila looked around at the bustling dining room, at the photographs on the walls, some old ones of Lucas, new ones of the Hells Angels who'd become family, pictures of the cafe's transformation. In the corner booth, Lucas's favorite spot, there was a small plaque in memory of Lucas Hayes, who taught us that kindness costs nothing but means everything. I think about him every day, Camila said quietly, especially when I'm helping someone. I wonder if he can see this, if he knows that his dreams came true. He knows, Brick said with certainty. And he's smiling. Hammer walked in, followed by his wife and 2 kids. His family had become regulars, stopping by every Sunday after church. His son, maybe 10 years old, ran up to the counter excitedly. Miss Camila. Dad says you knew him when he was sad. Before he got better. Camila smiled at the boy. I did. Your dad is a very strong man. He says you're strong too. He says you're a hero. Hammer ruffled his son's hair, looking at Camila with genuine affection. That's right, buddy. Miss Camila is a hero. She helps people when they need it most. Throughout the afternoon, more familiar faces came through. Shadow with his son Derek, who now worked as a mechanic at the new service area. Viper from Phoenix, passing through on a cross-country ride. A trucker who remembered when Camila had helped him during a breakdown 10 years ago. Each person added to the tapestry of connection that had formed around this cafe. As the sun began to set, painting the Gulf Coast sky in shades of orange and pink, Camila stepped outside. The parking lot was full of motorcycles, their chrome catching the fading light. She could hear laughter from inside, the clink of silverware, the sound of community. Steele joined her, 2 cups of coffee in hand. He gave her one, and they stood together in comfortable silence. You know what the beautiful thing is? Steele finally said. You didn't do any of this expecting a reward. You were just being kind, because that's who you are. And the universe responded. Lucas used to say that love always comes back, Camila replied. I didn't believe him after he died. I thought love just disappeared, left you empty. But he was right. All that love we put out into the world, it came back. Just not in the way I expected. Steele nodded. The Hells Angels have a reputation. People think we're dangerous, and sometimes we are. But at our core, we're about loyalty, brotherhood, and protecting the people who matter. You matter, Camila. You've always mattered. You just needed someone to show you. As darkness fell, the cafe's lights glowed warmly, a beacon on Highway 98, just as it had always been meant to be. Cars and motorcycles continued to pull in, travelers finding exactly what they needed: good food, safe shelter, and a reminder that kindness still existed in the world. Camila put on the leather vest Viper had given her months ago, the one that marked her as Angel of Highway 98. She wore it every day now, not as a costume, but as a reminder of who she'd become, and the family she'd found in the most unexpected place. Inside, her cafe was alive with voices and laughter, with the sound of people connecting over shared meals and shared stories. Somewhere she was certain Lucas was smiling. The light would always be on. The coffee would always be hot. And the door would always be open for anyone who needed shelter from the storm, because that's what angels do. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.